Is this something interesting when it comes to Hedera? Let me explain what I mean by this, even though nothing I say is financial advice. So, in terms of the grayscale smart contract fund, what is around 8.4% of those holdings? That's supposedly HBAR, which I think is pretty interesting. The thing is this, we have to consider the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, for instance. I'm not talking about this one. I'm just talking about, again, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust in general, not the smart contract fund. But the thing is this, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust supposedly, as of right now, has around 155,000 Bitcoin. To be a little bit more specific, it's around 155,638. But you know what? Tomato, tomato, right? However, the value in that, if we take a look at it as of right now, if we kind of consider the current value of Bitcoin, that's around like $10.5 billion. That's pretty impressive, in my opinion. So I think that, if anything, puts into perspective the scale of something like Grayscale. Which, did you catch the rhyme there? But yeah, besides that point, it's a little bit different, right? I think that when it comes to some other projects out there, some other entities, people like to say, oh, it's massive, but Grayscale, sometimes it's a little bit of a different ecosystem. That's the way you take a look at it. It's just a different vibe overall. It's just so massive. That's the thing. Here's also the thing, though. If I take a look at it, just HBAR alone, making up around 8.4% of Grayscale's smart contract fund, that's really impressive in my opinion. Now, what makes up the biggest holding within this? It's actually Solana. Ethereum is the second. Third is ADA, which is Cardano's native token, and actually they recently raised ADA's weighting in terms of this, right? So that's a pretty good thing when it comes to ADA. But you know what? HBAR is still there. So I find it very impressive. Now below HBAR, there's AVAX. We take a look at Avalanche, that's a pretty popular layer one blockchain, but AVAX makes up around 7.6% of the holdings, and SUI makes up around 7% of the holdings. Now, SUI is also a pretty impressive project overall, but I'm saying, HBAR is there. That's pretty impressive. However, here's the thing. What makes Hedera kind of stand out when it comes to that? Well, it's because Hedera Hashgraph, it doesn't utilize traditional blockchain technology. So it's a little bit different than some of the others there, right? And if I take a look at it, that makes Hedera just, I think, completely sort of unique, personally for me, when compared to something like a Cardano, like a SUI, or like a Solana, for instance. So yeah, I found that pretty interesting. Now, of course, this all kind of, sometimes people like to tell me, it doesn't really matter if HBAR is still around 31 times lower than $3. Yeah, okay, I get that argument in a sense, but also in a different sense, I actually feel like if I'm seeing all of this, if I'm seeing something like Grayscale even focus on Hedera to begin with, I think that right there kind of showcases that this is sometimes a project that's not ignored. So if I see a project like this being around 31 times lower than $3, having a big pullback, for me, I still want to be more focused. That's it. I don't want to give up because I am dollar cost averaging once a month. And why would I exit as of right now? The greed and fear index currently within the space overall is at extreme fear. So I'm going to leave at that and then start entering back in when everything is good again. No, I'm not going to do that. The journey along the way, it could be quite a lot. So this is why I just don't want to leave, and also why I don't want to leave down here and just enter back up here. No way. I'm not going to be doing that. It's like, for instance, going to a concert and only trying to get inside the concert when things are looking good and then leaving when things are kind of boring. But sometimes there's that build, right? There's that build to the main event. So if I leave that build to the main event, I don't want to just, quite essentially not be a part of it. Imagine if I try to go inside a concert and then go in the best part and then it's already ending. What happens? Then I have to leave when things are very boring. Yeah, I'm not going to be doing that. Personally, I like to stay there because eventually, if that wave does hypothetically come, it's kind of like preparing for that. But this is all purely just a hypothetical. This is just my mindset. However, at $3, if we were to consider HBAR at that point, at a market cap of around 128 billion, and that's if we consider, right, the current circulating supply of HBAR, it would have that market cap at the hypothetical idea of $3. Like, okay, sure, it's a very massive figure, but at the same time, I mean, come on. Dogecoin reached over 80 billion back in 2021 at one point in terms of market cap. This is not like too far off from that, and that was years ago. We have way more owners right now. There's over 600 million owners within this space, even currently, whereas in the peak of the 2021 cycle, there was like around 300 million. But the thing is, we just haven't seen an altcoin season during this cycle, so that's why I'm curious. I'm still holding. I just don't want to leave. This is just personally my mindset. In a space where it's dominated by projects that use traditional blockchain technology, a directed acyclic graph by nature is a breath of fresh air, right? It kind of adds something into the mix that's a little bit different, something that's a little bit more unique. So I do like that. And it's kind of like having options. That's the way you take a look at it. Sure, there's KFC, there's McDonald's, but there's also Popeyes, right? There's also In-N-Out. So again, there's options. That's the way you take a look at it. So Hedera doesn't need to become the best. As long as it's still somewhat relevant, I think that it's already pretty good enough. And the thing is this, even if Hedera doesn't really do anything much from here on out, which is kind of unlikely considering how impressively it's being run, but I'm saying even if we assume it doesn't do anything more fundamentally, it's already achieved a lot more than I think what a lot of other projects could ever dream of. I mean, Hedera's governing council includes Google, right? That's really impressive. FedEx recently joined the Hedera council. Some of their projects out there have been around for many, many years and they can't do that. So when it comes to Hedera, that's very impressive. Let alone some other projects out there, they can't even get a partnership with more than like 2 famous enterprises. But when it comes to Hedera, we just see very massive things in its governing council, like Dell, for instance, right? Dell, I think, is very impressive. You know, again, something like Mondelez, one of their brands is Oreo. So in the grand scheme of things, is Hedera such a bad project? I don't think so, because if I take a look at the resume, it's already done quite impressive things, actually. If it doesn't want to do anything anymore, which is unlikely, but I'm saying if it does not want to do anything anymore, that's already more impressive than I think over 90% of this space in terms of the projects that exist. So again, the way you take a look at it is when it comes to Hedera, I don't think it's such a bad project. That's why I still have the hypothetical idea of maybe $3 when it comes to my mind. This is all just a time will tell type of scenario, but I'm going to be waiting. I'm still going to be making updates when it comes to Hedera. I don't want to give up. My mindset is if I don't need to exit and if I don't want to, why would I exit for fun? I don't want to be doing that. Personally, I'm going to be holding. I'm just going to keep dollar cost averaging once a month. That's it, which I've been doing for over 2 years at this point. So I'm going to keep doing that. But in the meantime, I just don't want to leave. But again, I think it's pretty interesting that HBAR even makes up around 8.4% of the Grayscale smart contract fund. So if that is hypothetically the case, I think that's, again, very impressive because Grayscale, so massive, and something like Hedera, people sometimes don't really think about that, but supposedly that is the case. So I think that is pretty awesome, actually, at the end of the day. And I'll see y'all in the next one. I'll be sure to make more updated videos when it comes to Hedera. So I'll see y'all there. I'm out. Peace. Bye.